And there's a fight between Cale Yarborough and Donnie Allison. The tempers overflowing. They're angry. They know they have lost. And what a bitter defeat.
Alan Kulwicki is coming off of corner number 4, knowing that he's winning the championship. There's the checkered flag for Alan. He's the champion for 92.
It's going to be a drag race. Wow! They touch! Craven got him! Craven got him!
And the point right at the line. The one of Chastain past Hamlin.
If you've been watching NASCAR for long enough, you don't need to see to know what just happened. Cale Yarborough and the Allison brothers got into it on the backstretch, Alan Kulwicki capped off an improbable championship run, Ricky Craven beat Kurt Busch in the closest finish in NASCAR history, and Ross Chastain full sent his way into the championship 4. All iconic moments with equally iconic calls. So I figured we'd take some time today to revisit these moments, as well as the voices that made them what they are. Ever since NASCAR was put on the airwaves, it's been the announcer's job to communicate what's happening to the viewers at home. And while 95% of that job is reading off stats, calling out patterns, and predicting the outcome, there's always a handful of moments when the announcers shine. When things actually happen.
Larson tried to go to the middle. Oh, he got turned.
Or maybe not. To be fair, sometimes silence is the best option, especially if it spares us from calls like this.
That hammering you hear is the sound of the nail of the final coffin on the Chase contenders' hopes.
But thankfully, these don't happen very often.
Aggressive goes around.
I said they don't happen very often.
The wheel for Ross Chastain is still and perfect, and he has done it.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Okay, they happen quite a lot. But you try to find the right words in these moments. Hell, most of us in the crowd just end up screaming incoherently. It takes a truly articulate talent to put these moments into words. Though in NASCAR's infancy, they didn't have to do it live. Many races in the 50s and 60s were recorded and cut with narration to go with, often playing at local theaters and being copied on home videotapes. NASCAR's first foray in television would come in 1960, when the Daytona Duels, then the Twin 100s, were featured in the CBS Sports Spectacular, hosted by former NBA player Bud Palmer. It established a format where NASCAR races were just a small part of a larger program, encompassing highlights from all around the sports world and only really focusing on how the race ended. It was a format they stuck with for 20 years, though after just 2 years and one more race, CBS would turn over the rights to ABC's Wide World of Sports, commentated by legendary names like Bill Fleming.
I believe we'll take the checkered flag. No, he did not make it. He is less than 100 yards from it.
Jim McKay.
Headed for the checkered flag, and they're giving it to him now. It's all over. Bobby Isaac has won the 100-mile race.
And Chris Economaki.
Uh-oh, Donnie Allison, kicked by Tom Gale, he spins, and more cars pile in. It's one of those big ones. They're all over the racetrack.
Pioneers of sports journalism who, though pre-recorded in the early days, would oversee the first broadcasts of full NASCAR races in the 70s, which is also when the Motor Racing Network was created to broadcast strictly audio depictions for radio, founded by Big Bill France and an up-and-coming sportscaster from Vermont.
Hello, I'm Ken Squire. Directly behind me, 41 Grand National stock cars ready to compete.
We're about to hear from a long history of broadcasters, but if you asked most longtime fans, they'd say that Ken Squire's the best of the best. In fact, he was one of the main contributors in putting NASCAR on the map, as he was the one that proposed CBS do something that had never been done before, broadcast a full 500-mile race flag to flag. He called it a tough sell, citing the race as more of a novelty thing than something that could spark nationwide intrigue. But as it so happens, on the day of the race, an enormous snowstorm swept through the Northeast, leaving most people with nowhere to go and nothing to do but watch the Daytona 500. Now, it could have been an absolute snooze fest. In fact, only 2 of the past 2,500s up to this point featured a last lap pass, and both merely featured second taking first. And if it had been, most of us might not even know that stock car racing ever existed. But on that day, on the final lap, neither one of these drivers would go on to win. Squire makes the call.
Donnie Allison throws the block. Cale hits him. He slides. Donnie Allison slides. They hit again. They climb into the turn. They're hitting the wall. They're head on the wall. They slide down to the inside. Let's watch those third place cars. They're out of it. Who is going to win it? Coming down. Richard Petty is now pulling out in front. Darrell Waltrip is in second. A.J. Boyd is in third. Here they come. Waltrip trying to slingshot. Petty is out in front at the line. Waltrip to the inside. Petty wins it.
what would later become known as one of the sport's most pivotal moments, the guy who made it so also made the call, cementing his legacy not only as a great commentator, but one of NASCAR's most influential figures, though his influence doesn't stop here. He would continue to serve as the lap-by-lap commentator for many years to come, coining a lot of memorable phrases and dishing a lot of memorable nicknames. The Great American Race, Ken came up with that. When a car's being described as side over side, end over end, that's also a Squireism. Hell, as recently as 2017, in a guest appearance on Throwback Weekend, he called Erik Jones that Jones boy, which to this day is still his predominant nickname. Indeed, Ken Squier has made a strong case for being the voice of NASCAR. And if you ask me, amongst a sea of high-strung Southern accents, no one has a more eloquent voice than Ken. He wasn't without his partners in crime, however, as he would often share the booth with drivers like David Hobbs.
Richard Petty has won his 6th Daytona 500, and the crowd here are going absolutely mad.
Ned Jarrett.
He's going to make it. Dale Jarrett's going to win the Daytona 500.
And Neil Bonnet.
Unbelievable to run the kind of race that's been here today and finish it with a few inches.
Though by the late 80s, early 90s, CBS was just one of many covering the races, sharing the schedule with networks like ABC, TBS, and most memorably, ESPN, who had their own lineup of up-and-coming talent. Ken Squier might have established a legacy as NASCAR's original voice, but overseeing most of NASCAR's rise in the 90s was a different name entirely.
We here at ESPN very proud to bring you this final race of the 1992 season as we wrap things up.
Originally an aspiring disc jockey, Bob Jenkins would end up being one of the most recognizable voices not just in NASCAR, but F1, kart, IMSA, drag racing, everything. He was there from ESPN's inception, calling a 20-year run of Barn Burner.
Richard Petty holds him off, and Richard Petty picks up a victory.
After Barn Burner.
Here comes Mark Martin trying to make a move off of corner number 4. It's a drag race.
Wow. No.
After Barn Burner.
At the line, who wins it? I believe John.
Though no other call in his 20-year tenure quite holds a candle to Atlanta in '92, where a number of incredible storylines collide and Alan Kulwicki, an owner-driver with a bare-bones operation, pulls off an upset for the ages. Jenkins makes the call.
There's the checkered flag for Allen. He's the champion for '92. Remember his first win at Phoenix? He took what he called, and these are his words, a Polish victory lap.
Yep.
And guess what? He's going to do it again.
Never before had the NASCAR championship come so close in the final race, and never before had so much historical significance been put on one race. This wasn't lost on Bob, who called the race for what it was.
One of the most exciting races ever in Winston Cup racing.
We've tried to tell ourselves that it's just another race, but it isn't.
In the early stages of his career, he was joined by Larry Newberg.
Definitely at a much higher speed. Dale Earnhardt goes around the out-of-fuel Bill Elliott.
And would later be joined by former drivers like Benny Parsons.
Just exactly the opposite of the Daytona 500. It was 15-8.
Come 2000, ESPN would air its final NASCAR race before returning on ABC for a while and then leaving the sport for good. This past season, however, they picked up the rights to broadcast the reborn Thursday Night Thunder, bringing back many of NASCAR's old stars, both on the track and, in one case, in the booth.
Good afternoon, everyone from Charlotte. Looking forward to bringing you an exciting race today, and looking forward to bringing you more of it than we've ever been able to before.
If you want the poster child for NASCAR in the 2000s, Alan Bestwick's a good choice. Though he wasn't around for the entire decade, he called most races during NASCAR's crest in popularity, including the first race in Daytona since Dale Sr.'s death in the 500, where his son Dale Jr. would give his friends, family, and millions of fans the ultimate form of solace and dedication.
But it's going to be Dale Earnhardt Jr. using lessons learned from his father to go from 6th to 1st and score the victory in the Pepsi 400.
A couple years later, he'd be there to call Jr. home at Daytona again, this time in February.
The legacy continues. Dale Earnhardt Jr. wins the 46th Daytona 500.
He was also joined by Dick Berggren.
Look at him pop that fist out the window. He knows he's done something special. He knows.
And Wally Dallenbach.
That was beautiful. Very, very nice.
Though in 2005, the network made a change. In the year prior, Bestwick had broken his leg in a charity hockey game, and for 2 races he needed a substitute, though even after he returned to call the last 6 races, that substitute would become his replacement. And that replacement was former lead pit reporter Bill Weber.
I'm Bill Weber with a special seat this week high above the Talladega Superspeedway.
Like Bestwick, he had a good voice for the booth, but unlike Bestwick, he never quite meshed with the fans in the same way. Plus, moments like these didn't help his case.
Harvick sweeps at Bristol. At Richmond.
Awesome.
Where are we, Bill?
We're Richmond.
You big
I got
dummy.
too excited.
In 2009, ahead of the New Hampshire race, TNT suspended Webber from broadcast appearances, only to later release him in full. The details around this are still pretty murky, but word around the media center was that he got into a shouting match with somebody in his hotel lobby, which apparently escalated a little too far. And after just 1 year away, he was sighted in St. Petersburg, Florida, practicing a new role as a magician. By mid-2011, Bestwick was back in the booth, just in time to call Stewart's 2011 championship.
And he's become a three-time NASCAR Sprint Cup champion. Tony Stewart wins it.
Marcos Ambrose's incredible win at Watkins Glen.
A nudge, a push. Can Ambrose save it? To the checkered flag.
This ridiculous pileup at Talladega.
Oh, there's contact. Stewart into the middle of the pack and over.
And one last Brickyard 400 for the race's inaugural winner.
20 years later, he wins the 21st. Checkered flag in the Brickyard 400 to Jeff Gordon.
Like NASCAR, Bestwick's time was stymied by inconsequential decision-making and inconsistent meddling. But even for the limited time he was around, he made every race something truly special. Now remember MRN? Well, they've been cooking throughout all this time as well. And while they naturally have less of a following than their television counterparts, they've had their own lineups of great on-air experts. Guys like Barney Hall.
That's the kind of racing in the old days you used to see at Darlington. They got physical for the last 5 laps, and Ricky Craven couldn't have won by more than 6 inches.
Eli Gold.
Oh, the 3 cars touch. They get together. Labonte spins. Waltrip stays low. Darrell Waltrip is going to win here at Martinsville.
And Joe Moore.
Junior scores the win. Hamlin spins at the line. 12, 13 cars involved in a spin.
MRN's younger brother, the Performance Racing Network, also features some memorable names like Doug Rice.
Chris Busch's car flipping in the infield grasses and barrel rolls a half a dozen times.
And Mark Garrow.
Alex Bowman stays way outside of them too. Allmendinger gets into Alex Bowman. Ross Chastain back out to the front.
Some honorable mentions include the gentle giant, Buddy Baker, Dr. Jerry Punch, who once saved Rusty Wallace's life from inside the car, Rusty Wallace himself, and longtime Truck Series announcer Rick Allen, who's still calling races today alongside Jeff Burton, Steve Letarte, and Dale Jr.
Take a look at what he did!
I have never seen anything like that before in my life.
I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention the countless pit reporters bringing information straight from the source. People like Marty Snyder, Jamie Little, Brock Yates, Wendy Venturini, Chris Devoda, Matt Yoakum, and Steve Burns. And at one point, that list included another name. You see, if we rewind back to that 79 Daytona 500 and pause it right here, you might catch a glimpse of him. He's currently in turns 1 and 2 calling the race for MRN. You might not know him yet, but over the next few decades, NASCAR fans would get very familiar with who I believe is the single greatest commentator of all time.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Joy. Joining us on the telecast today, gentleman who's owned the Benny and Bill Parsons Skoal Copenhagen racing team.
Having gotten his start in the local short track scene, Mike Joy was picked up by MRN to be a freelance reporter, then a co-anchor, then their general manager and executive producer, all in the span of a couple years. In 1981, he made his debut as the lead commentator in ESPN's first live broadcast of a NASCAR race, calling the Atlanta Journal 500 in a one-off for the network. He would continue to serve MRN for a number of years, whilst also serving as a CBS pit reporter under Ken Squire, which, among other things, is probably where he got his incredible broadcast etiquette. Even amidst the hustle and bustle of pit road, his coherence was impeccable, efficiently communicating and asking just the right questions to fill in the booth, as well as the viewers at home. And by 1998, he would quite literally fill in the booth, as Ken Squire moved to the role of studio host. After 15 years on pit road, Mike Joy would once again be seated as the bird's eye view, and his first major race of the season happened to coincide with one of racing's most iconic moments. Mike Joy makes the call.
20 years of trying, 20 years of frustration. Dale Earnhardt will come to the caution flag to win the Daytona 500. Finally.
For the 01 season, NASCAR signed away its broadcasting rights to Fox, who would once again give Mike Joy the reins of the booth with one of the most dynamic combos in television history: 3-time Cup champion Darrell Waltrip and America's crew chief Larry McReynolds. I could go on and on about their incredible 19-year run, about their first race where triumph was interwoven with tragedy.
You got it! You got it! You got it! You got it!
About an improbable comeback interwoven with an amazing finish.
Just like a year ago, he's gonna get him though. He's gonna get him. Gordon got loose in Torbe.
About the closest finish in NASCAR history.
They touch! They touch! Kramer even got him!
About an all-star race so incredible it made 8 to go feel like 1 to go.
Newman all the way up against the wall. There's still 3. He's got him. He's got him. Oh, there we go.
Keep your foot in it.
Keep your foot in it. Still going.
About a 20-year-old winning on the sport's biggest stage.
Cinderella Vane is going to win the Daytona 500. Unbelievable.
And about a finish so ridiculous you have to see it to believe it.
They're 3 wide. 3 by 3 to the line. Johnson.
Seriously, I could go on for hours delving into the treasure trove of breathtaking moments that these guys helped to make so memorable. But to me, there's one call that sticks out. One that I could recite from memory, not only based on the obscene number of times I've seen it, but how each voice contributes to the immense suspense of this final lap. I can't do it justice by talking about it, so I'll just show it. And for Mark Martin fans, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to watch it one more time. Mike Joy, DW, and Larry Mack make the call.
And there goes Schlag back a little bit. Is he going to get help? Is he going to come? He's looking. Almost. He almost squeezed Harvick into the wall, and here comes Harvick, the 29, with Matt Kenseth.
Oh, Mark got loose. Mark got loose.
Harvick's getting a run off turn 4. It's going to be a drag race all the way back to the start-finish line. No caution. They're side by side, right to the line.
Big crash. Here they come. Checkered flag. The Daytona 500.
We got one car on his roof coming across the start-finish line.
They're wrecking everywhere. Boyer's on fire. Jeff Gordon's wrecked.
And they are still wrecking.
Have you ever?
I'm going to repeat what I heard a few years ago. No, I have never.
Some people have questioned how a bunch of journalists could get into the NASCAR Hall of Fame alongside drivers, owners, and mechanics. But you have to understand, they're not just talking heads. They are the ringmasters, the savants, the gurus that brought an absurd, localized motorsport to the entire world. I know I missed a few other noteworthy names, but there's just so many of them. So many voices that have not just described, but defined the sport across multiple generations. They are the voices that nurtured us through the highs and the lows. And believe it or not, someday people will talk about guys like Bowyer, Gordon, Harvick, Burton, and Dale Jr. in the same light. So whether you grew up with Jim McKay, Ken Squire, Bob Jenkins, Mike Joy, or none of them, remember to appreciate not just the talent on the track, but the talent off of it, because they are, have been, and forever will be the voices of NASCAR.